Hey, Brian. Hey, YouTube.
Hey everyone. Yeah, sorry about everybody. Sorry to everybody that showed up early. We are recording it a little bit later than normal, but we'll get started now. Hello and welcome to Python Bytes, where we deliver Python news and headlines directly to your earbuds. This is episode 291, recorded July 6, 2022, and I'm Brian Hawken.
Hey, I'm Michael Kennedy.
Good to see you, Michael.
Yeah, good to see Brian as well. Fun as always. Like, there's just a never-ending flow of fun stuff to talk about. I know we got good stuff to share today, as always.
Yes, we do. Why don't you kick us off?
All right, I'm gonna kick us off with licensing, something everybody's super psyched about. But I think you will find this project interesting, and I don't know how you'll receive it, but I was like, wait a minute, what? This is odd. So this project comes to us from Tom Nyhoff, and he sent this in and said, it occurred to me that we have licenses for things like PyTest. So I could go search for PyTest, and over on GitHub, turn on my programming lens, over on GitHub, I could check this out. And what is the license? Well, it looks like the license is MIT. So if I want to use PyTest, I'm buying into the MIT license, right?
Yeah, kind of.
Sometimes.
Only if you ship with it.
That's true. But, there are libraries like Request or whatever that you might, ship, right? So I'll just put PyTest in here to see what we get. So this project is called Python Project Insight, and it only has about 5,300 packages parsed in so far. But the idea is you can say, load the dependencies, and it'll show you the licenses. So, for example, for PyTest, we have the MIT license, but PyTest depends upon packaging and import lib metadata and colorama and pyparsing and adders and typing extensions. Well, packaging has the Apache license. Colorama has the BSD license. Adders has MIT license. So does PyTest. And then the Python Software Foundation has typing extensions. So I don't know. What do you think of that?
It is interesting, and I don't know what to do with it.
I don't either. I'm like, wait a minute. I have to kind of sort of consider the transitive closure of the dependencies for their licenses. And I had never really, I'm sure people are there. Well, of course, Michael, of course, that's how it works. But for me, I hadn't really thought about it. I look at the project or the library and it has this license. Like another one could be, that you would build on before, more likely would be like requests. So if we load the dependencies for requests, you have Apache, BSD, MIT, and Mozilla split across that one project. So yeah, I just think this is pretty wild. Tom pointed out that TensorFlow was one of the more wild ones. If you load up TensorFlow, there's just lots of different licenses here. Like sample the GitHub licensing options, basically.
So if I was shipping a commercial product with Python that used a whole bunch of dependencies, I do know that this transitive closure stuff, the stuff that I'm actually shipping with, I really am supposed to list those and have those licenses listed in
right,
somewhere,
in a sense, because you are shipping the dependencies of a thing in order for that thing to work, right?
Yeah. So you're at least saying I'm using this, it's here, and here's the license for it. I think that's the case. I'm not a lawyer, of course. But there's a whole bunch of these tools like PyTest, for instance, that we use that we don't ship. Those are a different story. And it's kind of a different license thing. But I don't know about the packages. Are these like the packages that these are shipping? They're there. They're not really being sold. But do you have to list the licenses of the things that you're depending on? I don't know.
So, I don't know either. I think maybe in some times it doesn't matter. But if it was GPL rather than LGPL, right, for example, that might be something you care about. I don't know. I would love to hear people who really understand this super well, if they could like maybe tweet at us or comment on the YouTube stream or something like that about exactly what that means. But I do think it's pretty interesting information. Like mostly this shows the licenses, but it also shows the total size of installing the project and what libraries it depends upon. So you can kind of like poke around with that as well.
That's actually pretty useful and interesting information as well that you don't really think about is how big of a download do I get if I put pull all these things together. So yeah,
Yeah, and you
interesting.
can pile them up. So you can say I'm using TensorFlow, I'm using sklearn,
Yeah.
I'm using request, whatever. And then you can say like, okay, for those three, tell me about what the story is. You know what I mean? Then it
Yeah.
gets a little more interesting still. I guess
Hmm.
maybe that's not quite right, but that
Yeah,
just comes with
neat.
SciPy. But anyway, yeah, something like that, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
neat. So anyway, thanks Tom for sending that in and sharing it with us.
Well, I think I'll switch gears a little bit and talk about data classes. So I actually really like data classes. Have you used data classes much, Mike? Michael?
They definitely have some very neat properties. I find myself kind of when I'm on the edge of using a data class, I'm like, maybe Pydantic, but Frozen is
Yeah.
a cool option you can add. Slots makes so many things awesome in terms of lower memory usage, faster attribute access, all kinds of things. And if it's just slots equal true on the class definition, that's kind of
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, it is. So Trey Hunter is a Python trainer, and he came up with this cool tool on his Python morsels site called the undata class, and it's actually also a library that he released, a little tool that's undata class. And the idea is he was thinking like what would be the equivalent of a data class if you didn't write a data class, if you wanted to have the same sort of functionality, what would you do in a normal class? So he's got this cool tool down, and the example shows, yeah, it shows here slots, just a point with XYZ, all floats, and also shows frozen sets and slots. But I'm going to turn those off. And you just change the class, and it changes the output, and he prints out what an equivalent class would be if you didn't use data classes. So actually, I'm not, and I tried to make sure I understood all of this. So one of the things that it's kind of neat that it's part of a learning tool that he's got, that it shows you, what you get with data classes, but there's not a lot of description around like what all this means. So this is sort of a fun thing to help you look up stuff, I guess. So right off the bat, if we just have X, Y, and Z, you have a dunder init that takes X, Y, and Z as input values and assigns them, and it comes with a nice repr class, and then an EQ, a dunder EQ, which is for equality. And one of the things I wanted to look up was to make sure I understood is what it does is it says if the other thing, if I'm getting compared with something else, if that other thing is also my same type, in this in this case point, uh, then you can do the equality comparison. Otherwise, to raise a not implemented, and that's just kind of a convention because Python. And then what happens is Python will try to call EQ on the other thing of like reverse the order and stuff because it's kind of how Python works. But it's one of those hidden sort of things is you need to kind of know that if you don't know what to do in an EQ class or an EQ function, raise not implemented, and then Python goes from there. And then resetting though, if you give it slots, all the slots does is add slots to it, and that's it, which is kind of cool. And
That's
what
easy.
slots does, yeah, and what slots does is it makes it so that you can't add later. So if you can't add a W attribute later, to your point, but then
Yeah.
if you do frozen, it does a whole bunch of stuff. You get a whole bunch more dunder methods, but mostly these are just raising exceptions so that if you try to change it, it raises an exception. So anyway, this is kind of cool.
Yeah. Do you see the dunder init, the constructor implementation when you add frozen? It doesn't say
It does
self.x.
change.
It calls set adder like behind the scenes, and then it implements
Yeah,
set adder and del adder and raises exceptions if you try to mess with it. It's pretty wild.
that's cool. We're also going to link to a couple articles that Trey wrote about. He wrote about this, about how he wrote this, and Well, one of the things I'm bringing this up partly because I like data classes and it's kind of cool for people to learn what they are. But in his developing this, he says he came up with having a great use case for the new match case blocks in Python, using Sentinel objects, which I'm not sure what he's talking about there. So I'll have to take that look at that. Using text wrap dedent, which I love, and it's nice to see somebody else using that. Slice, and then an AST. So he's using AST in here. So it's kind of a cool, fun example of using that. So anyway,
Yeah,
cool
a lot of cool stuff in action there. Go back to the first one, the first tab you got there.
Yeah.
One of the things I appreciate from this example is you just say class point x colon float, y colon float, z colon float. You put the data class attribute on it. Look how much it's doing for you, right? Like it's not just the typed values, but it's protecting the read write ability, making it read only. It's getting a repr definition. It's getting hashability, equality, not equality, effectively by. All right, there's a lot of cool things it's adding for you there.
Yeah, and he's suggesting doing other stuff like using keyword only and different fields to see if you can change how it works. But yeah, I'll have to play with this some more. And a reminder to everybody that is like data classes are almost enough, but you need more. We'll also look at adders because adders is a kind of a superset of data classes.
Right.
So
yeah, fantastic. Looks great.
Cool.
All right, Brian, the next one I got here, this one's for you. Okay.
All right.
So let's go back. We'll take a two-step process to approach this. Did you ever use links, LYNX?
Yeah, like a long time ago.
I remember SSH. I think I telnetted into the mainframes back at the university, and I'd run LYNX. This predated the graphical web. I mean, it's insane, right? So, but it's a browser that is pure text in the terminal. Today we have all these fancy browsers, but one of the things you had a lot of was like keyboard shortcuts and other types of things you could do, right?
Yeah.
Well, now that it's 30 years later, what if we could go back to a time a little bit like that? So I want to introduce you to the Qt browser, Qute browser. Okay. So what is this? The Qt browser is also like kind of in need of a homepage refresh, but it's a keyboard focused browser with a minimal GUI. And what's interesting is it's built with Python. Okay, so it's a full web browser built with Python, and it's kind of like a Vimper or one of these other ones that lets you do Vim like control and behavior of it, a little bit like links, but it's actually Chrome, more or less, at least the Chrome runtime. So this one was sent in. I'm going to make sure I give him credit for giving us a shout out. This one was sent in to us by Martin Boris, and it's pretty neat. So it's a browser. Let me switch up my screen share just for you for a sec. Stop, and then I'm going to add the Qt browser. You ready? Where is it? There. All right. So look at this bad boy. So this is the browser. And how do I go to places? Well, I can click on things. Like here's a link I can click on. But if I want to go somewhere, I press O, and it pulls up a place I can open. Look at this. I got my history. I want to go to like, I go to Talk Python. If I want to do a command, I hit colon, and here's all my commands. I've like my tab, focus and control, and so on. Go over here and just type F. So if I want to navigate, for example, I'm here on the Talk Python page. What if I want to go to courses? I type F, and then everything. See how everything gets a letter above it?
Oh, that's pretty great.
So L, D, D, G. If I want to go to D, I just press D, and then we're off on the Talk Python training site, and so on. So I could open, say open, and I could search for PyTest, pull up my tests, and so on. And I can do a new tab. I got to remember how to do that. Yeah, we're gonna say tab clone. And I come over here. I know there's a bunch of good commands that I'm not following, like very much like if I was actually using Vim.
Yeah.
If I could search for PyTest book, I could come over here, right? Like that. And then I can hit is it control or Windows? Control.
Ooh, that's a good book.
I heard that's a good book. So I can like cycle through my tabs, see how minimal my tabs are and stuff right there. See
Oh
on the
yeah.
bottom, it's got all the little commands. So anyway, and I can type :Q, boom, we're out.
Nice.
What do you think of this? Yeah, what do you think of that?
I actually love the Qt browser. I haven't used it much, but I definitely know about it because the Florian Bruin, who started Qt browser, he's a PyTest core contributor, and also one of the technical reviewers for the PyTest book. So really cool guy. But I love the idea of being able to just use a browser with a keyboard and not have to touch the mouse at all. That's like that's next level.
It's pretty neat.
I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, let's see. Out in the audience, Kim Van Wyck, hey Kim, says, I resign myself to using a mouse more than I want to. Qt browser may be the way to go. Thanks for the tip. Awesome.
Yeah.
And Alvaro says, are those VS Code shortcuts? I suppose only if you have the Vim binding set in VS Code. But then I sort of yes. Which really just means Vim.
Of course you do. Why wouldn't you?
Are you a monster? No.
Can you even do Emacs bindings? And
I don't know. You could do non-Vim bindings.
Yeah, right.
But then people would look down on you, right, Brian? No,
but
I don't do Vim stuff in mine. I know that you probably do though.
Yeah, I use Vim everywhere, especially in VS Code. So nice. But it is. I think people should check it out. It's kind of a cool project, and also it helped push forward some of the some PyTest things. We got some new features because of this, so it's cool.
Yeah, that's great. I installed it with Homebrew, so that was easy to install. You can install it with apt on Linux. I'm not sure about Windows, but they've got a quick start guide, so you can follow along to see like, what you might want to do. Like it's not super obvious.
No, that cheat sheet is kind of an eye chart for key binding.
It's a bit of an eye chart. I suspect you can zoom it. There you go. It's still small. Okay. It's still small. But yeah, I do like the navigation, pressing like F and then just a letter to navigate instead of using your mouse to follow the links. That's pretty cool.
Do you remember those those templates that people used to have like back in the day for like in like office tools where they would
right overlay. You would put them, it was actually an overlay on your keyboard.
Yeah, it would go over the function keys to so that you could remember which functions did what during what application. And if you switch to Word, you put a different, or probably WordPerfect at the time, you put a different template over it. And
yeah, I'm gonna use Lotus 123. Give me the function key overlay.
Yeah. Okay. No, I'm just
totally like that. It is
showing how old I am. So let's talk about something new.
Teach that in college.
Yeah. No, they don't. Although in college I had to teach. I was a TA for like a computers 101 class during grad school, and links was one of the things we had to teach. And I was like, nobody's going to use this. Yeah, but it was part of the curriculum. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Anyway, so let's switch to something new like async. So I think we've talked about Court probably several times. And Court it's like Flask, but it's async. It actually does the entire. It supports the Flask API, or I think, and sort of looks the same, but it's async instead, pretty much. But there's a problem.
Super close. You can basically everywhere you have the word Flask, if you replace it with the word Court, it more or less works. So like lowercase, like import lowercase f Flask, you import lowercase Court. If you create an object capital F Flask, you use capital Court, and then it lets you do async basically.
Cool. But there's an ecosystem around both of them now. So there are extensions to Flask. Some of them work on Court. There's extensions to Court. I don't know if any of those work on Flask, but the people behind both of them kind of are supportive of the whole thing. And so Court is actually now part of the Palettes project. Is the big news, and Palettes is the project that includes Flask and a whole bunch of other stuff. But because of this, it will help maybe the maintainers kind of work together a little bit better and smoother to iron this out. So the big difference, of course, is that Flask has a whiskey server behind it. Server, right word. And Court is ASCII, so asynchronous. But the it's so this is cool. Well, why do we care a little bit? Is that it used to be that really you had to do async. If you wanted async, you had to do Court. But now Flask, as a Flask 2.0, you do have some async capabilities, but it's still using a single threaded server. So there are some limitations. So kind of interesting to read about this. There is a async and await page on the Flask website that talks about really what the trade-offs are, what the performance and the background tasks, and how to do that within without shifting to Court, but then also talks about at some point you might want to just switch to Court instead. The along this line is I was thinking about this partly while I was looking at this other article from Steve Pate that called "Should You Use Async on Your Next Python Web Application?" Which I wanted to bring this up because I was curious about what your take on it was. Well, the first part is that it's a really nice history. It talks about the history of web server interfaces with Python, with the timelines and whiskey and ASCII, and then how async IO came into play, and how UVicorn is popular, and Gunicorn. I don't know how to say that.
I'm pretty sure it's G unicorn because it's short for green unicorn. So the last bit should still be pronounced unicorn. So I'm going to go with G.
Okay. And then there's Hypercorn, which is the asynchronous web server that's similar. Anyway, so it talks about this, but then at the end, the conclusion, it talks about all the different frameworks. In the conclusion is most people don't need async on their web server. And I was curious what your reaction to this conclusion is.
I have some thoughts. Okay, so here's my thought. It depends. It depends on how far you need to push it towards the edge. I was surprised how far you can get without async in terms of concurrency.
Okay.
So I recently did an in-person class. Imagine that, over Zoom, but live in person. I actually have some more to say about that. It's kind of related. But anyway, I just did a course with some folks who are doing fast API, and they said, look, this async stuff that we're doing, it adds some complexity to the way that we got to write code. And we're not sure whether or not there's a trade-off. So what we did is we actually ended up writing a fast API app with using the sync and the async version of SQL Alchemy, and then using a sync and an async version of fast API endpoints. Okay. With the database that we had as the backend, and the database was not the limiting factor because it was at like 10% CPU while this was happening. It was just chilling.
Yeah.
But with a real database, Postgres as the backend, what we found was we could do, if I can remember this right. Oh boy, I can certainly give you the relative bit. So with the synchronous version, we got way more scalability than we thought. So it was like 75% performance of the async version. So
okay,
that seems way higher because the database like most of the things we were doing is just waiting on the database. But because we were running in G Unicorn with UVicorn workers, well, it's really just in G Unicorn with threads, Python doesn't do threading well, except when it's listening on a network socket or doing a few other things that will release the GIL. And guess what? When you're talking to database, you're listening to network sockets. So there's all these points that naturally free up the threading.
Interesting.
And actually got us like 75% of the way there, but we still got 25 to 30% more performance out of the async version. And it was like, I think it was 5 worker processes running on my 8-core machine, talking to Postgres, and we were getting some like, like 2,000 requests per second versus 1,500 a second, or maybe it was 1,000, 1,500, something like that. It was a lot of requests per second. But we did get more performance out of the async version. So my depends is like that last 25. Are you like that close to your performance? I would say 95% of the web apps are not maxed, right? They're not maxed out with like multiple servers trying to deal with it. All right. 95% of servers are doing important work, but they're probably still have a lot of capacity left. So it's like, it depends. Do you need that last 25%, or does it not really matter?
Yeah. And also,
those are my thoughts.
What's the load like on your typical? I mean, what are your levels anyway, right? So, if you already have like for instance, if you already have an application running, you can measure it and see what your load is looking like and how many people you have. And then if you think, oh, I might increase my, what if we double? Then you can kind of guess what your load's going to look like if you double and stuff. So interesting. One of the,
I recommend people check out this locus thing because it's so easy to say. A typical user clicks on the page between 5 and 15 seconds. They might go log in some of the time. They might go hit the home page. They might hit the about, and then you can say, I would like to see how many users I can take. And if you're 10x what you need, it doesn't matter whether you use async or not, but there is a performance benefit. It's just not as massive as it might sound.
The other bit that I want to like point out is the one statement that like it depends on what you're using also. Like I can't find the bit here, but he was talking about how one application he was thinking about, oh, I might do async, except for he was using a payment gateway that didn't have an async version. So he had to use a synchronous for that. And since it's synchronous somewhere, you kind of have, is that true? If it's synchronous somewhere, you have to be synchronous everywhere, or is that not really true? Do you know?
Say that if it's async, it's async everywhere, or sync, it's sync everywhere.
Either one. Is either one of those true? If I've got an application and I do need to hit a gateway that's synchronous, do I need to, if I isolate it, I guess I can probably do asynchronous and hide it that way. But
yeah, I mean, you just don't get as good a scalability there, and you kind of block up the processing if you do the sync. For the async one, you can do like a wrapper where you say like, we're going to do some async work, but I'm just going to call that and block because all the other stuff above it doesn't want to deal with being async. So it's easier to go from sync to async to like have part of it be async. The other way around is a little more tricky. It can mess it up a bit.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Interesting conversation. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. It is. Sure is. Is that it? Is that all of our items?
Are we? I think. Is that all of our items?
So.
I guess so.
Yeah. What, you got any extras for us?
I don't.
Okay.
No.
Well, I have some. Let me pull them up here. Locus, look, let me tell you about it now. It's great. All right. No, I have 3 things I want to tell people about. Number 1 is I did a talk at Python Web Conference, the HTMX and Flask one that I've done in some other places, but that was a fun talk, like a 45-minute Flask plus HTMX goodness there. And so that video, along with all the other Python WebConf 2022 talks, are now on YouTube. So people can check that out. Did you know that the Python Web Conference had 5 days, and I think it was like 4 or 5 tracks all day. So there are a ton of videos. There's like 150 videos or something on there. I mean, look at this scroll bar here. It's probably gonna like page as I get to the bottom too. Yep. You look at that. So there's a lot of talks that people can come check out if they're interested in that. One of them being
pretty cool.
HTMX that I did.
Yeah,
Yep.
I want to watch your talk. You've given that a couple times, haven't
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, I've gave it a couple times. Basically, the way it worked is like when I was working in that course and really like playing with those ideas, I submitted to a bunch of conferences, and those conferences were either a year out or they were like a month out or something, right? So that's how
Oh
it
yeah,
ended up so spread out.
but
The other one is I mentioned the browser. That was fun. But how about the Browserosaurus? This is
okay.
a Mac OS only tool, but there's probably something like it for the others. So here's the thing. Suppose I'm in Typora, which is a markdown editor, or I'm in PowerPoint and it's got a link and I click it. By default, it opens in the default browser. But depending on what you're doing, you might want it to be like, oh, sometimes I wanted to open in Vivaldi, but other times I wanted to open in, like, say, the Qt browser or Orion or some odd thing like that, right? So the idea with this thing is that you click a link, and when it opens up, instead of opening in the default browser, the Browserosaurus is the default. And then you have keyboard shortcuts like F for Firefox, E for Edge, S for Safari. And you say, well, which one do you want to open in right now? And it basically just delegates to the different browsers you register it with. So you can hit T for Tor or F for Firefox when you click a link. That's kind of cool, right?
That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't been convinced that I would use that or not, but
Yeah.
I do appreciate it. And I feel like maybe someone sent that in, and if they did, I really appreciate it. But yeah, I don't have any notes of who sent it in. So anyway, that's pretty cool. If you find yourself, copy link going to different browsers a lot, and you're on Mac, I know that's like a rapidly decreasing Venn diagram. But if you're in that space, this might be a cool option for you.
Yeah.
Is it written
Speaking
with
of
anyway? TypeScript mostly.
Okay. So speaking of browsers, I just found this because I was like, is Lynx dead? Can I use something like Lynx now? And there's a browser called Browsh, which is a text-based browser. So that's still a thing. Cool. I had to try this out.
Oh my gosh. I love it that it kind of has text, but it like 8-bit pixelates it.
Yeah, it takes
I mean,
the
it has
images
pictures,
and
but
makes
it
them
kind of
terrible.
8-bit.
Yeah.
It takes the images and makes them look like what you would get.
Yeah. So I'll have to
Pretty
give this
funny.
a try. Yeah.
And you run it in Docker. Of course you do. All right. Pretty cool. All right. Go ahead. One more before we get to our joke. The other one
Okay.
is I talked about doing a live class. So I actually have an announcement for a live class that I'm doing. So obviously people know I have a bunch of online courses, and of course I'm already working on the next one of those, and we got a bunch coming there. But I want to try some experiment, something where people can attend a class in person with other people, right? If they sort of help each other along. And I've tried this before, this cohort thing, but I think I've got a better platform, a better way to do it. So over at this link I'm going to put in the show notes, I'm doing a fast API and MongoDB. So basically fast API, Pydantic, Beanie, and MongoDB course that is going to be a 6-day course over 2 weeks. And it has a couple hours a day, and should have a bunch of people there working together on some fun stuff. And I'll be live teaching every session. So it's going to be like a live course as if you were attending it in person, just remotely, because it's 2022 and it's not, I guess it's not post-COVID all the way. But anyway, it's got a really cool set of topics that we cover. It talks about async. It talks about Mongo, Beanie, Pydantic, Fast API, of course. We even use Locust at the end to test it out.
I think this would be fun. This looks great. Cool.
Yeah, awesome. I think it'll be fun
idea.
too. I think it'll be neat to have this experience with people. And I've tried this before, but all my prior attempts were good, I think, but they were like, oh, take the online course and then we'll do like a community type thing. This is like a live course that I'm just teaching one-off for that group of people that sign up. So we'll see how that goes. If it goes really well and people love it, then I'll do more of these. If not, then maybe less of them. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But this is happening August 8th to 19th. So it has a real date because it has, a real live aspect to it.
Nice.
All right. Cool. That's and Mario on the honor says, that's my stack right there. Oh yeah, that's a good stack right there. There's some really good stuff to talk about there. I've been using Beanie and Fast API for stuff, and obviously Mongo.
Yeah. Speaking of courses,
right.
one question out there: how's the PyTest course going? It is going. It's creeping forward, but life has gotten in the way. And
no,
we'll
it's
get
awesome
it
that
out
you're
as soon as we
having.
can.
Yeah, it's awesome that you're working on that. It takes a while to create a course, doesn't it?
Longer than I thought. I'm like, man, I already wrote the book. I can totally pop a course out like a couple days. Yeah.
Yes, of course. Would you say that, like, as a junior developer, you might think about this differently than after somebody's been doing it for a while?
Yeah. This cracked me up. So I
This
can't
is a
remember
great
who
joke you
shared
got
this
here.
on somebody shared it on Twitter. Sorry, I don't know who, but okay, so in a job interview, you've got somebody gets asked, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And the junior developer in this interview question like shows a picture of like the black hoodie with multiple screens and light up keyboard.
Like
Just I'm in
5
hacker zone.
screens, just
Yeah.
totally
Yeah.
coding. Yeah.
Senior developer, where do you see yourself in 5 years? On a farm.
Pumpkin farming with cows and apples, and you know what? I'm about done. I love it.
Yeah, my personal thoughts are, why not both? This is just a view of the inside his office and then outside. So
Yeah,
working from home, man.
that's right. Working from home.
Yeah.
All right, I have maybe the one that preceded that, the one that, or maybe is in between these two that might precipitate the second. You ready?
Okay.
All right, so this is a tweet from Programming Humor. It's a strange language, that JS. JavaScript is such a strange language. Nobody can understand it. But if they manage to, then they create their own framework.
Yes.
Everyone's got their JavaScript front-end framework or something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And you've made it when the framework you've invented starts showing up on job requirements.
That's right. With 4 years experience when it's still 2 years old.
Exactly. So,
yep.
Well, good episode, Michael. Thanks for showing up again.
You bet. Fun as always. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Catch up with you later.
In the Slack and everything. Bye.
Yep.